Alright guys, let's try this note taking without me present. The substitute should have handed you out a graphic organizer. It says Chapter 3, the Biosphere. We'll get started from there. If you can stop, pause, and go back and do what you need to do in order so that you stay on task. First thing we have to talk about is the difference between interaction and interdependence. Interaction is when two organisms have I guess you could say, relationship with each other that's not dependent on one another. Interdependence means they have to have the other one in order to live. So if you can look, ecology is the interaction between organisms and their environment. Okay, and we call the biosphere the land, water, or air where all life exists. This next slide gives you one of those great click and drag things in order. The levels of organization starts from a species and ranges all the way to an ecosystem. So it starts simple and goes to complex. You first start with a group of species, organisms so similar they can mate. A group of species is a population. Then populations make up a community. And finally, the different communities will make up an ecosystem, kind of what you see in the picture on the right. Ecologists use three different methods to conduct their research. They're not like lab people. The first method they use is making observations. The second method they use is experimentation. And the third method they use is modeling. Modeling is more like making a recreation, kind of like what you see in the last picture. We don't know what dinosaurs look like, but we made models of what we assume they look like based on the fossil record. How does energy flow through an ecosystem? Well, it has to start with the producers. Sunlight is the main source of energy for all living things on Earth. No sun, no life. If you can recall what the definition for an autotroph is, any organism that makes its own food. With plants, it's through the process of photosynthesis. An autotroph and a producer are about the same thing. Producers are organisms that make their own food. And once again, 98% of them are plants. Alright, if we review the photosynthetic equation real quick, what you should write on your graphic organizer, those blanks. H2O, or water, plus carbon dioxide in the presence of light yields glucose and O2. So photosynthesis was the part of where we make energy from light. Chemosynthesis was, like we talked about, hydrothermal vents, and those are the worms that you see on the picture. Chemosynthesis is making energy based on breaking down chemical bonds. Well, if we know what a producer is, now we have to know what a consumer is. A consumer would be similar to a heterotroph, or organisms that get their energy from some other organism. Organisms that rely on other organisms for food and energy are called consumers. There are four different types of consumers. First of all, we have herbivores that eat only plants, carnivores that eat only meat, omnivores that eat meat and plants, and then detrivores that eat dead things. Finally, we have decomposers. The relationships between producers and consumers are feeding relationships. Now, energy flows through an ecosystem in only one direction, starting with the producers and moving through the chain. Okay, the producer will give energy to the primary consumer, which will give energy to the secondary consumer. That's what makes up a food chain, a series of steps in which organisms transfer energy. That's what you're going to be responsible for making at the end of today's class. Food webs are actually food chains that are intertwined with each other. What you notice in the picture are multiple food chains that have been linked together to form a complex system or network. Food webs have different trophic levels. They still start with producers, which are 99% of the time plants, and they'll go to primary consumers, secondary, third, all the way up to apex consumers, which don't have an arrow leading from them to anything else. There are three different types of ecological pyramids. There's an energy pyramid, a biomass pyramid, and a numbers pyramid. Energy pyramid shows the flow of energy through an ecosystem, largest at the base where the producers are, smaller as it gets top towards the apex predators. Numbers and biomass pyramids are simply just looking at the amount or number of individuals in a certain classification or system in the pyramid. The three green arrows in the recycling symbol stand for reduce, reuse, and recycle. Recycling is moving energy back through an ecosystem. We recycle things like water through the water cycle, nutrients like nitrogen through the nitrogen cycle, but recycling is nature's way of being able to use things over and over again without running out of the necessary resources. Nutrient limitations are sometimes when in an ecosystem the lack of nutrients will limit what can grow. A lot of times what you see on the right hand side is runoff of fertilizer from a field will deplete the oxygen supply in a water source and cause an algal bloom, which is what you see in the picture with the goose.